Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Wanji's Q&A. And this evening, we would like to welcome everybody to a live Q&A with Endo-Champ and creator of Endo Girl short film, Sophia Bender. Sophia will be chatting about her own personal experience with endometriosis, as well as giving us an insight into her film. Sophia is an Endo-Champ with Endometriosis Australia and gives a voice to those 1 in 10 women suffering from this chronic disease. Welcome, Sophie. Tell us about you.
Hi. I am an Endo-Champ with Endometriosis Australia, and I'm really excited to be here on this live stream tonight to talk to you guys a little bit about my journey. So I am a dance filmmaker. I left Tassie when I was 16 to pursue a career in classical ballet, and I moved to Sydney to the McDonald College, and I studied there for 2 years. And then I went to WAPA in Western Australia, where I did a 3-year dance degree. While I was studying at WAPA, I had a lot of injuries that started to come up, along with a lot of unknown symptoms that weren't really pointing towards anything. And I was struggling a lot physically and mentally during this time. And it led me to actually discover film. So we had one of our classes, which was choreography at the time, and one of the options was to create dance films. And so I thought, I'm gonna give this a go, and I'm gonna give this a try. And I just absolutely loved it. I think I felt really liberated for the first time in a long time, being injured and feeling like I was sitting on the floor and watching everyone dance and I couldn't participate. And all of a sudden I found something that I could get up and I could run with, which was really amazing. And so this then led me to transitioning into film. And so I was fortunate enough to get a position at the VCA to then do a degree in film. And so over those years, I always decided I'm going to combine dance and film together because they were, both of my passions. So it was great at VCA. I got to do all my films were dance films. And if we ever had to study a film, I always chose a dance film to write my essays on. And which has then led me to work with the Australian Ballet, which has been really fantastic over the last 3 years since graduating. So that's kind of my career journey, I guess you could say, and what I do for a living.
Yeah. Well, I guess with the symbolism, we're here to talk about both endometriosis and also about the film. But what I've noticed, and probably some of the audience have as well, is that you have symbolism of the spider web. But I think what we really should know before we go on any further is, for our audience, is actually what is endo and what is it, how does it impact people?
Yeah, so endometriosis is a condition that affects 1 in 10 women worldwide, and it's where the lining of the uterus actually grows outside the uterus. And so this can cause things like extremely painful periods. It can join your organs together. Intercourse can be really painful. It can cause infertility, really severe bloating. And a lot of fatigue is another huge one. And it causes a lot of complications, especially when it gets to the later stages where it can actually join your organs together. So the lining starts to grow outside and it almost creates, you can see in some pictures from surgeries, internal photographs, it looks like spider webs have actually joined everything together, which is just absolutely so painful. And it's a really debilitating disease. There's no cure, and the only way to actually diagnose it is through an invasive surgery. So the average time to diagnosis is about 7 to 12 years. So that is
terrible.
Insane.
That is so insane. I mean, this must impact people so much from a day-to-day basis. How did it impact you?
Well, I think for me, the journey of mine started, I would definitely say, way back when I first got my period when I was 13. I was having quite painful periods, but I didn't really think a whole lot of it at the time. I was doing a lot of ballet, like, being an athlete. So I wasn't probably getting as heavy periods through a lot of it. And I think the first time I really remember was when I was about 18 and I was at the McDonald College and I couldn't go to class that day and do ballet because I was in so much pain. And I think that was a bit of a shock that I was like, oh, this has stopped me going to this. And, probably through high school, I might have taken time off with my period and stuff. But when I couldn't go to ballet because of it, I think that was kind of like, oh my gosh, this is really painful. And where's this come from? And then, of course, towards my third year at WAPA, so I was 21 at the time, when I had all these injuries, I wasn't dancing as much. And I don't know if this caused the symptoms to get a lot worse at the time, or if it was just coincidence of, that the endo had been growing for a number of years, because I had actually been getting my periods every 3 weeks to the date, which is another sign of endo having irregular periods.
Really?
And I just thought it was normal for me because all my period, I would get them 3 weeks to the day. So I sort of thought, oh, this is my normal. That's just what happens to me. And I, like everyone else would to the month, I would know on that day I was going to get it. So
how do we know what's normal? I mean, lots of women have, lots going on with their bodies, and how do they understand what actually is normal, and how can they, watch their cycles and see what's happening to really think about whether this might be applicable to them?
Well, I think that's the thing. I think that there is starting to be a lot more awareness about it now, but we'll get on to talk about the film later. But one of the beautiful warriors from our film, Amanda, she has this comment that really stuck with me through a lot of the editing process, where she just said the simple line, I thought my periods were normal because they were normal for me. And that relates back to what you said.
I saw that.
How does anyone know what's normal if, like I might sprain my ankle the same severity that you sprained yours, but I might feel pain more, or do you know what I mean? It's so variable, and there's a lot of women that actually have stage 4 endo who don't have any symptoms, or they'll have stage 1 endometriosis and they'll have severe symptoms. So there's just so many unknowns, and it's so varied in symptoms and stages and how it affects everyone. I mean, there's these ongoing underlying symptoms that are the same for everyone, but everyone's experience with it is extremely unique.
So you obviously have lived and breathed this journey, and this film is all about your journey of diagnosis, but tell us what made you want to do this film, and tell us about the film.
Yeah, so I had just graduated from VCA, and I knew that I wanted to obviously make another film after I graduated, and I was sort of starting to get excited about what the next thing was going to be. I'd finished my graduation film and I was ready to kind of get into the next one. And I was struggling a lot with my endometriosis at the time, how it had affected me in relationships, and just a lot of different, struggling with body image, with the severe bloating, and the fears of fertility for the future and things like that. And I just sort of
thought, that's a lot to think about.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I just sort of thought, this is a no-brainer. I've got to make a film about this, because I believe that as a filmmaker and as a creative, we have so much power to make a difference through our artwork and through our voice, that I just knew that I had to make this film and I had to do justice to all of these women that were out there suffering with this, you know, insidious disease. And so this is where the journey of Endo Girl started. And it took me maybe about a year to sort of get all the script together, and I was doing that alongside working. So I was
Wow, that's
kind
hard,
of a
isn't it?
weekend. Yeah, it was sort of
Yeah.
a weekend job in cafes writing the script and things like that, and thinking about how I wanted it all to come together. And, you know, having dance passion, you know, dance film was my main love and passion. I knew that it had to incorporate dance into it. And I just sort of thought, you know, I didn't want to make a documentary that was standard talking heads and following these women around their day-to-day life and in doctor's appointments and things like that, because I wanted to do it in a way that was going to be incredibly striking and visual, that made it
Yeah.
feel really memorable and really confronting for viewers, because the disease is so confronting. So that's sort of how, you know, the theme of it all came together, and that it had dance in it and all of that. And then, of course, I had to get the women together. So
Oh,
I
wow, then this is you have managed to get, well, I don't know how you actually got such a small group, because is it 12 women that you've got together?
so there's
And, you know,
13
such
including
different ages.
myself.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
tell me
well,
about that. Tell me about your research and getting all of these women together.
yeah, well, this was one of my, you know, favorite parts of the journey, because I met so many amazing women, you know, pulling them all together. And I started originally, I thought I would only have 10 women. That was kind of the plan, because it was like
Yep.
1 in 10 women. That was just kind of the number that I thought I was going to do. And that would be including myself as well, because I had decided to be in the film. And I put like lots of posts out on Facebook and stuff. And I knew right from the beginning that I wanted to have a really diverse range of women in the film, because Endo doesn't discriminate against, you know, color or race or age. And I really wanted to make sure that that was going to be evident in, you know, how I was portraying the women in the film.
So
So, yeah.
when you put the question out on Facebook, what did you ask? I mean, you wanted to get people to be interested in the film. How did you approach them?
Yeah, so I put out lots of posts in all the endo support groups, you know, around Melbourne,
Mm.
asking, you know, if anyone would be interested in telling their story in my film. And we had a Facebook page at the time. We didn't have much on it, but that's sort of what I was able to show them, a little bit about what they would be getting involved in. And, you know, I was saying that, you know, I wanted lots of diversity and women of all ages. And for me, the hardest one was finding the youngest member, who is Yazzie, who was actually 12 at the time we interviewed her. And it was so hard to find someone of that age. And I knew right from the beginning that there had to be someone who was at least 12 or 13, because that's the age that it starts. And so I felt like, in order to put this film out there and educate people and make them aware of it, I had to have someone of that age that was going to resonate with other girls that age who were going to watch the film, so that they didn't just watch it and think, oh, that's something that might happen when I'm older. They could watch, you know, Yazzie and think, oh, I'm in school too, and I'm having to miss school as well. And so luckily, through a lot of, you know, reaching out, and a couple of people came forward, like parents. I messaged a lot of parents on the pages who had messaged about advice for their daughters who had endo, and a lot of them weren't comfortable to do it, or they were too nervous. And one of the women in the film, Madison, it was actually her younger sister. So
Oh, okay.
I came across her, and, you know,
Madison.
she was one of the first women that I locked in for the film. And I said to her, oh, you don't happen to know any, you know, young girls who have endo? And she said, oh, well, my sister actually, and this is another thing as well that I need to mention, is that Yazzie hasn't actually officially been diagnosed with endo yet because she's too young to have the surgery. So her sister has it and her mother has it, and I think another close relative, it might be her auntie as well, and
Wow.
having a lot of these like pains and a lot of the typical endo symptoms. So, you know, it was just wonderful to have her on board and for Maddie to, you know, let me know about her. And yeah, it was a very special moment having her on set. And it was actually really nice to hear a lot of the shift in, while she had struggled a lot with, you know, being at school and having her period and some confronting comments from some of her friends, that, you know, the support about having your period between your teachers and the other students in her class were really supportive about it, and they talk really openly about it and stuff like that. And so it was really nice to hear the shift compared to, you know, interviewing one of the other women before her who may have been in their 50s, to then hearing how much more open the new generation were to actually talking about their periods. And yeah, and just being open.
Interesting, yeah.
Yeah, it was great to see that shift.
Yeah. So you went in search of these women, and then you found these 12 women. I mean, I've listened to some of the shorts, and I think you have some samples of some of the women talking. How have you incorporated their stories? And you don't feel like you have to give everything away about the film, because the shorts just look beautiful. I love the way you have incorporated color and the forest and everything like that. But how have you incorporated the stories of the women into that mystery of the forest? The symbolism, I guess, is what I saw.
Yeah. So as I said, I always knew that I wanted to incorporate dance into the film. And I wanted to use the dance element as a metaphor of these women's stories to actually bring them to life. So we interviewed the women first. That was the initial thing that we did. It was the first thing that we filmed. And I just remember sitting on set after the 2 days that we interviewed all of them back to back, including myself, and just feeling so overwhelmed and so drained by, you know, by their stories. And as an endo warrior myself, I knew how bad endo was, but I just didn't know how bad it had actually been for some of these women and the impact. You know, I have a girl in the film who is 20 who's already had 10 surgeries. You know, it was women who didn't get diagnosed until they were 40 and had suffered their whole life. You know, there was a lot of stories that I guess I didn't know how bad a lot of them were. I knew that they were out there, but I didn't meet a lot of the women for the first time until we actually interviewed them. We'd had these conversations over the phone and through Messenger, but I hadn't actually spoken, you know, hadn't seen them face to face and heard their full story. And we interviewed each of them for an hour. So they were able to really elaborate on everything. And I just remember at the end of it thinking, I owe these women so much for telling their stories and for being so brave and so vulnerable. And this really, you know, drove me to use the dance to bring their stories justice and to bring them to life, because I felt like I had such a responsibility having their stories in my hand and how I was then going to actually bring them to life and to do them justice. So the film is actually sort of in 4 scenes, and the first and the final scene are in like a black box type scenario, and we also have 13 dancers as well that we found, and I wanted them to almost, you know, represent all of the women. So I had a 12-year-old girl.
Okay.
I had a woman as well who was in her 50s as well, who was dancing too, because I wanted to to really reflect their ages and their diversity through the dancing as well. And so their stories are brought to life through their dancing, but then also there's these beautiful forest scenes in the middle of the film, which I dance in, and also our wonderful composer Thomas Parrish, who also does acting and dancing as well. He danced beside me, and we danced together representing the effect that endo has on relationships. And for me, that was really, really big driving force for one of the initial reasons that I wanted to create the film. And so it was wonderful working with him and doing this dancing in the forest. And there's a sequence where I'm riding a bike through the forest.
Yes, I've seen this. Yes,
and it was quite funny how that story came about. So
I think you go like this.
Yeah, I was in a cafe one Sunday, and a girl that I went to school with, who I haven't seen in like 10 years, I knew that she had endo because she'd reached out to me since I had my surgery and knew I was making the film. And I messaged her and I said, "Oh, can you just tell me a little bit about your journey with endo and your story and stuff?" And she told me about this one experience where she'd been having her period for over a month. She'd been bleeding really heavily every day, which is another thing that can happen. And she was riding a bike home from work, and she said she just kept riding and she fainted while she was riding her bike. And I don't know what it was, but the imagery of this moment really, stuck out to me. And I thought, we've got to have a bike in the forest. So I ended up riding a bike for 2 days through the freezing cold forest, and you'll see how that's incorporated into the film when you see it. But yeah, I just felt like it was really beautiful imagery, and that particular scene was portrayed through the part of the film where it's the women sort of talking about the journey to getting the diagnosis and the doctors turning them away and people not believing them. And so that sort of repetitive nature of going and going and going and not really knowing and coming to the final peak as well of thinking that a diagnosis would mean hope. And it's this really confronting moment for most women when they are diagnosed, where you get this diagnosis and you go, "Oh my God, I'm valid, I'm justified, I do have a disease, I have something wrong with me." And all these years and all these doctors that told me that there was nothing wrong and it was all in my head, it's explained and it's valid, and it's this sigh of relief. But then I have an incurable disease for the rest of my life. And then it's kind of going on to that. So
it's that process of just many, many doctors telling your same story over and over.
Yes.
And then having to go through the process of actually having to have an operation to find out that you've got the disease as well.
Yes.
But then out of that, finding how awful it was, but then in some way being elated because at least you have to follow the rules of managing it.
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
That's exactly it. I mean, I remember when I woke up from my surgery and my gynecologist was there, and he said, I said, "Did you find any endo?" I remember being so out of it, but I remember saying, did you find any endo? And he said, "Yes, we found quite a lot of endo. It was on your bowel, your bladder, your womb, your fallopian tubes, and I think there was a cyst or two as well." I mean, it's sort of hard to remember at the time, but I just remember crying because I was like, there's that fear as well when you go into the surgery where you think, what if they don't find anything? And all these years and all those doctors were right. And what does that mean if I come out of this surgery now and they've found nothing, and the shame and the embarrassment that.
Oh, that's terrible.
But you know, but that's
This is how women. This is what women feel like, isn't it? This is
yeah,
what women feel like when they go to the doctors and they get doubted.
exactly. And so, you know, I was in a situation where this was back when I was living in Perth, and you know, I was a really thin ballet dancer at the time, and I had this really severe bloating, which was just so out of the blue. And I looked like I was pregnant. And I went to the GP and she felt my stomach and she said,
Mm.
"Oh, are you sure you're not pregnant?" And I said, "Yes, I'm sure that I'm definitely not pregnant." At the time, I was still a virgin. And she then proceeded to say, "Oh, you know, I think I'm going to get you to take a pregnancy test just in case."
Really? Wow.
And
That's how did that
that,
make you feel?
well, I remember at the time just coming home with my friends and laughing about it because, you know,
Mm.
at the time I'd never had a partner and I'd never been in a relationship. So it almost just seemed really comical. But it
Yeah.
wasn't until, like, I don't think I remember feeling overly hurt at the time.
Mm.
But it wasn't until much, you know, a few years later when I did get my diagnosis and I looked back and I thought, wow, that was really not okay. Like that, you know, and they should know, they should think, oh, well, she's got this severe bloating. Maybe it is endometriosis. If they know that that's, you know, they didn't ask me at all about what my periods were like or anything. And I hadn't even put the two and two together. I didn't even know what endometriosis was back then. So
Mm.
I would have
Mm.
never guessed it.
Yeah.
And I was just fortunate enough that, you know, when I did get to the situation a few months after that, when I was back in Tasmania before moving to Melbourne, I passed out and I ended up in hospital. And when I arrived at the hospital, I got my period and I told this to the nurse and she said, "Oh, well, you know, you had all this pain and then you fainted and now you've got your period." She said, "Maybe you have endometriosis." And
Phew.
I remember thinking, what's that? And then sort of realizing that maybe my auntie had that, but
Mm.
I hadn't really had the conversation, but I knew that maybe she did. Later, obviously now I know that she does have it. She has
Mm.
had
Mm.
it. And just, but thinking, I wonder, you know, I was 21, but I wonder if that nurse didn't say that to me. Like the luck of that and the chance of that. What if I had have had a different nurse that day and they didn't say maybe you have endometriosis? Because then that led me to being referred to a gynecologist and going down that journey to investigate it. But you know, what if I hadn't have been in that situation? And
Mm.
who knows? Maybe I still wouldn't even know that I had it. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So that's often what happens, isn't it? So you talk to some women, and is that what happened to some of them? I mean, you mentioned that I think some of the research was that it takes from 7 to 12 years for women to be diagnosed, and sounds like this is this is how it happens. Is it, you know, you just might not give the right information, or you see the doctor that doesn't quite understand that this is a woman's problem.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. One of the really interesting stories in the film, who Amanda, who I mentioned before,
Mm.
she didn't get diagnosed until she was in her 40s, and she'd only been diagnosed about 6 months before we actually did the film. She'd recently joined
Wow.
the group and everything, but she didn't have any typical endometriosis symptoms throughout her life. She had really low iron, bad fatigue, and would get severe migraines.
Wow.
And that's all she'd, you know, really, like, she had experienced that through her whole life and she'd really struggled with it. But no one goes like fatigue, migraines, low iron, you've got endometriosis. Like no one put it all together. But basically what happened to her was she ended up getting some pain, which she then went and realized that there was a cyst there when she had an
Mm.
ultrasound. And
Mm.
then when they operated to take it out, she had stage 4 endometriosis. And she'd never had the typical cramps, you know, curling over in pain. Her periods had never really stopped her from doing anything other than the fact that she'd get really, really heavy periods, but they weren't necessarily painful. And she said when we were filming, after she'd had the operation, she had her first period after it, and it was a really normal flow. And she rang her sister in a panic saying, is this what a normal period's meant to be? Well, like what's going on? Like, I'm hardly getting any bleeding and I don't have blood clots, and what's happening? And she was in a panic crying, and her sister said, no, that's what mine are like. That's normal. And she was just so overwhelmed by this. And her mother had actually had all the same symptoms as her and never been diagnosed. So her mother obviously had it as well, but just didn't know and wasn't aware of it either. And so she wasn't able to say to her daughter, hey, you might have endometriosis, I have it too. And when her daughter complained of heavy periods and things, she just said, well, that's normal.
That's normal.
That's what mine are like. So, yeah.
So it's I guess it comes back to, you know, this normal and what we think is normal, and what pain we're willing to put up with. Because as women, you know, we've obviously had periods through our lives, and we just get told, you know, that's normal, and so deal with it. But to have stage 4, what does stage 4 mean?
So stage 4 is when it has got to a point when it is connecting your organs together. So there's stage 1 to 4, and 1, I guess, is having a little bit of endometriosis on some of your organs, and then obviously it progresses worse and worse, spreading further and sort of connecting them. And the other thing to note as well is it doesn't just grow around those areas. It can grow in your lungs as well, and other places. So Jessica, one of our endo warriors, has thoracic endometriosis, and she's had surgeries to deal with that as well, and has struggled really severely with that over a number of years. And it's always been a bit of a question as to if that might be something that I suffer with, because when I was at WAPA, I had a chest injury and I went to get a CT scan, and it came back that I had these pulmonary nodules on my lungs, and which was completely unrelated to what we were looking at. And so that happened a few months before my diagnosis, and it wasn't until about a year later that I thought, oh, well, actually, I do get quite short of breath when I have my period, and I do, you know, I do feel like it's harder to breathe when I have it. And I was starting to realize that that was aligning with my period, and then that you could get thoracic endo. But I mean, luckily, since I've been on the pill, and I think it's been able to an extent suppress it, because I'm not having as many periods a year anymore, I haven't had too many issues with that. But my gynecologist said, you know, it can grow anywhere in the body. He said, I don't know if it was one of his patients or a story he'd heard or research, but there was a woman who had like a blue dot in her fingernail, and every time she got her period, it would get bigger and painful. And it was like an endometriosis that was like in her finger. So, I mean, it's obviously a lot rarer to travel to other places, but it can go on the brain, your eyes. These are obviously more rare cases, but it happens. And that's just the whole mystery of how unknown and bizarre it actually is.
So this film is about women's stories, but what we also hear is that this impacts not only the person that has the endo, but it also impacts the people around them, and also that sometimes the perception of other people is incorrect as well. So tell me how you told that or tell me how that happens in real life, and I guess how you've talked about that in the film.
Yeah, well, I think, there's a lot of different scenarios across all the women about, how it had affected different relationships in their life with, workplaces, whether a workplace was supportive or, a workplace wasn't supportive in terms of like a working relationship. I mean, yeah, there's many scenarios where it can be supported and it can't be across, relationships, families, things like that. But definitely in the film, I wanted the women to just be able to really truly tell their stories from their point of view, so that people around them would be able to watch it and be like, oh shit, this is really serious, and this isn't just, my friend who's talking about this is all these other women as well. And so, maybe this is a thing. But definitely relationships is something that a lot of women struggle with their endo. Having said that, that a lot of the women came to set with the most beautiful, supportive partners who sat there and had tissues ready on hand and were just so beautiful and gave me so much hope for the future that, there are men out there who are so supportive of these women. But having said that, at the same time, because relationships was a question that I asked all of the women, if they hadn't experienced, like pretty much all of them had experienced issues in relationships at some point in their life. So one of the women's stories was that she was on her way to emergency with a ovarian torsion. So she had so much endo that it actually like twisted her ovary from the way it was growing and connecting to different areas. And her boyfriend rang her and she said, I'm on the way to hospital. I'm in an ambulance. And her boyfriend said, what's for dinner? And so, and stuff like she'd asked him to take the day off work to look after her, to have her surgery. And he said, like it's elective, it's not life-threatening and things like that. And, that's an extreme scenario. And also one of the other women, when she was younger, she had a partner who just cheated on her because she couldn't have sex all the time, and it was always her fault, and just mistreated her really, really poorly because of it. And yeah, he cheated on her and he left her. And so there's a lot of sensitivity around the area of, painful sex and stuff, because you feel like you're letting your partner down if you can't do that. And the guilt and shame that's associated with that, I mean, especially for me, has just been awful and makes you scared to get into new relationships and meet new people, because you just think, oh, if I can't do that, they might not want to be with me. And I know realistically that it's like, well, then they're not the right person. But,
exactly.
At the same time, it is still something that you do think about and that you do have to worry about, that is just, really, really hard to deal with.
Yeah. Do you think it's the perception of the disease that some people don't really see it as a serious disease? It hasn't been given that escalation of, say, cancer or insert disease here, because it's a women's disease and we've probably taken it on board and we've dealt with it. Do you think that's the case?
I think that's definitely a huge factor of it. I think it's interesting because when I started making the film, well, actually, hang on, backtrack a bit. When I was first diagnosed with endo quite a few years ago, like what would it have been now, 6 years ago, a lot of people didn't really know what it was when I talked to them about it. And since then, there has been quite a big shift where a lot of people know what it is, but they don't understand what it is. Like they've heard of the name, but they don't understand the severity. They don't quite know how serious it is and how debilitating it can be for a lot of women. And yeah, I think there's that thing of it's like, oh, well, you know, it's just your period. And I imagine that there's so many women out there who as well haven't been diagnosed, who might be having painful sex and things like that. And their partners just think, oh, you know, it's just your period, or, you know, every girl goes through it. Or, you know, as well, I had a family member, which was really upsetting when I was dealing with my severe bloating. He actually proceeded to stick his stomach out and say, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. Everyone can do that. And it was like, no, like I'm this stick thin ballet dancer and this is not normal. Like
it's not normal.
I would go from abs to that, you know, in a matter of a few minutes randomly. Like it wasn't something that was normal at all.
So do you think this is the reason why we still don't have an easy way to get diagnosed? So you mentioned that at the moment you actually have to go through an operation to get diagnosed, and that probably takes many, many doctor visits and specialists and tests and invasive activity. So, you know, is there sort of research on something coming forward about, you know, maybe getting a blood test instead of in surgery, or is there's something on the horizon that we know about?
I mean, not really that I'm aware of. There's been, I think it was last year, for a couple of weeks, there was some stuff in the news about a blood test that could diagnose endo. And everyone was getting really excited and everyone was like sharing it to me. But it was just like fake news. It wasn't even like a legitimate thing. And I believe that, you know, there are that like is a thing that they're trying to research at the moment. In terms of a specific thing to help diagnose it, I'm not exactly sure. However, I do know that we, like a lot of different endometriosis like organizations and universities who are studying it and trying to find a cure and research, were just given, I think, $9.5 million from the Australian government a few weeks ago, which was really exciting.
Excellent. So, yes.
Yeah, which was amazing. And one of our endo warriors, Eliza, is actually doing her PhD in endo research, who's in the film. So it's been really exciting to talk to her, and her university was one that was given a certain amount of the funding. And I think the way they're doing it is they're giving a certain percentage to different unis who are looking at different things. So one is looking at like the genetic side of it, and then another might be looking at a better way to diagnose. So they've kind of separated the funding into the different areas, because there's so much that needs to be known. I mean, they don't know what causes it. They don't know if it's genetic. They don't know how to diagnose it without the surgery. You know, they don't have a cure. So there's so many aspects that need to be discovered and that need the funding for. And, you know, I think that we are starting to get more funding and a lot more awareness, and it's getting a lot more recognized, but I think we still have a long way to go.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've created this film to give women a voice and to escalate this problem. I mean, what would be the absolute most amazing thing that would come out of this film?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. So obviously, I mean, a cure? No.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, well.
when I first decided to make the film, I was, as I said, I was feeling really helpless, and I thought, I can't find a better way to diagnose it. I can't find a cure. I'm not a scientist. but I can raise awareness and I can do that. And one of the women says a quote in the film that really resonates with me, which is, I hope for a day when everyone knows what endometriosis is. And if my film could spread that awareness to everyone, I want to get to a stage where if someone says, I have endometriosis, it's no different to saying something like, I have asthma or diabetes. Like, can you imagine saying to someone, I have asthma, and them saying, what's that? You know,
Exactly.
you can't even imagine a world when that, is a thing. So to get to a stage when everyone knows what the word endometriosis is and it's really recognized by everyone. And for me, just if I was having a bad day at uni and I was having really bad pain and someone would say, oh, what's wrong? I would be sitting there thinking, oh, I could tell them I'm having an endo flare, but if they don't know what endometriosis is, I'm going to have a really awkward conversation with this person about my period.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you just say, oh, I'm not feeling well, or you wouldn't be able to be really truthful, or, eventually all my peers knew that I had endometriosis. So I could just say, yeah, I'm having an endo flare today, or, and it's that way at work too. Everyone's aware of it. So I'm able to just say that and use that language and people know straight away what's happening. But it's just, it's almost hard to imagine just saying to people I have endo and knowing that they'll know what it is. As I said, a lot more people are understanding it now, but they might know, but they don't really understand. Sure. They're too scared to ask because they kind of know it's about periods, so they don't really want to know about it. And it's like I've got this speech in my head. It's like, you think, okay, I'm going to tell this person I'm having an endo flare, and okay, here we go, wind it up. Yeah, I have endometriosis. Oh, it's a condition. It affects 1 in 10 women, and it's affected, you've got the whole spiel ready to go. And so many endo warriors are just have the same thing. They're so ready to just tell people what it is. And I think I was really uncomfortable about it at first, but I got to the point where, even through making the film, before even showing people or anything, just being in an Uber and the driver would say, oh, what do you do? Oh, I'm a filmmaker. Oh, what films are you making? Oh, I'm making a film on endometriosis. Oh, what's that? And then I was able to just have people at cafes, what are you writing a script on? Or just able to have use it as a tool to have the conversation with people about what endo is, and just person by person just keep spreading the awareness and getting it out there.
Yeah. Well, I really hope that your film does get visibility. I mean, you've actually put your own, money into making this film, which, just basically, I think that is amazing in itself, how passionate you are about this awareness and to bring that language into everyday life and do it creatively in the way that you've done this film. What happened there? You decided to use your own money.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was getting to a stage where, I was trying to get funding for the film, and I wasn't able to. I'd applied for a couple of things and I was getting rejected, and I thought, oh, am I going to just keep applying and am I going to keep waiting? And I thought, no, I've got to do this. I have to do this. And so, I mean, I'd been fortunate enough, well, not through a fortunate situation, but I had inherited a little bit of money last year. So I was able to use that to put towards the film. And a lot of people thought that I was crazy spending my inheritance on a film. And I just feel so strongly about it and getting awareness out there, because I know that there's so many women out there who are afraid of using their voice, or they're not ready to use their voice yet. I mean, it can take years to feel comfortable talking about these things. And I respected that there's a lot of people out there that aren't ready to do that. And I was. So I wanted to be a voice for all of those women and, you know, to use my skills to get the story across there. So for me, I thought, I'm going to use this inheritance, got a loan out from my parents, and, you know, made it happen because I just felt like the time was then and I had to do it.
Well, I think a lot of other women will thank you for, you know, creating this film and providing the awareness. And I know that we will put in the chat, we'll put in the donate link so that if, you know, people do feel like they are really excited for Sophia and, you know, want to, you know, help with getting the message out there. And also if any filmmakers that want to, I guess, you know, this goes into film festivals, doesn't it? So we're hoping that you can have this film in film festivals and actually have this message go global. It's a global problem.
Yeah, exactly. And just to sort of elaborate a little bit on that for a lot of you wondering, you know, where you can see the film and when you're going to be able to see the film, because I know a lot of people ask me this all the time. So we're currently entering the film in film festivals. This has been pretty heavily affected by the pandemic. A lot of festivals have been cancelled or they've gone online and they're taking less films. And so this has kind of slowed down our premiere, I guess. But I'm currently looking at other ways to release the film on maybe a different platform or somewhere that I can really get a lot of global reach. So stay tuned, and you will be able to see the film eventually. There is an extended interview of the 12 women and myself on all our social media pages as well. So if you've seen the trailer and you want to see more, I can do that for now. If you want to hear a little bit more of their stories.
Well, I can't wait, and I'll be sharing it as soon as I see it. You know, the problem, I mean, at Wanji here, we understand the problem of people having to see many doctors and how, you know, how desperate people feel, you know, when they have to do that. But there's probably some things that people would like to clarify. So I guess for our audience, I'd like to clarify what things are fact and what things are myths. So when you're managing this endo, so what do people think is actually true, but it's a myth?
So there's the two, I guess, main myths are having a baby will cure endometriosis. I've even been told that myself. This is not a cure. A lot of the women in the film had children and they said it came back with a vengeance after they had a baby. So having a baby does not cure endometriosis. I'm not really sure where that fact kind of came around, but my only, you know, guess as someone sort of thinking about it is probably just because you don't have your period for 9 months when you're pregnant. So the growth is slowed down for 9 months. That's all I can really think. But yes, having a baby will not cure endometriosis, and having a hysterectomy will also not cure endometriosis. It can help some women. So another little thing to sort of put out there is there's also another condition, which is a lot of people like to call it endometriosis' sister or cousin, which is called adenomyosis. So I also suffer with this as well. And so endometriosis is when the lining of the uterus grows outside the uterus. And adenomyosis is when the lining actually and the growth grows inside the lining. So it grows in the muscle and in the wall. So the only way you can cure that by having a hysterectomy, And so a lot of women have both endometriosis and adenomyosis. So a lot of them will have a lot of relief in their symptoms if they do have their uterus removed, because they do remove the adenomyosis. So that's a bit confusing and a little bit to get your head around, and it took me quite some time to get my head around that as well. Can't actually diagnose that from an ultrasound and MRI, adenomyosis. But yeah, so I think that's maybe where some of that confusion may come in. But yeah, those are the two main ones. I think a lot of people out there say, I've been on this amazing diet that has completely cured my endo, and I've went and had this acupuncture which has cured it. And I think all of these things are super valid because everyone is so different, and different things will help other people, but it might not help some. So that's kind of a confusing thing. There's a lot of people out there that will like swear by something curing it, and it may help them and it may slow down their growth and it may help their condition, but it may not help others. So that's kind of a confronting thing as well. When you have someone messaging you saying, oh, this diet cured my endo, and you're there being like, oh, I've tried like 50 different diets and I've been through all of that and it didn't help it. Or, there's little things you pick up along the way. Like definitely for me, seeing a pelvic floor physio definitely helped me. And I know that helps a lot of women, but it might not help others. So yeah, it's all really individual.
So any other myths or any particular facts that we want to make sure that our audience knows about?
Yeah, so 1 in 10 women, there's no cure, 7 to 12 years to diagnose. I mean, I think those are the main facts. I don't know if anyone in the audience has any particular ones that they want to clarify, but those are the main ones I can kind of think of off the top of my head. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say it's hilarious, but I found it hilarious, was when I had an article on the ABC about the film a few weeks ago, and it was posted online, and one of the comments was, do we know if we can catch it yet? And I just thought, that's what I mean. People have heard of it, but they don't, you can't catch endometriosis. It is not contagious. You will not catch it. It's not an STI as well. That's another one. A lot of people think that it's a sexually transmitted disease. It's not. Yeah, so those are another 2 ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
And any particular, we've only got a couple of minutes left, but any particular hints to help women that we know it's 7 to 12 years to get diagnosed? Any particular things that people should be doing or saying, when they go and see doctors?
I think stand up for what you believe is true. And as hard as it is, don't be disheartened, if you keep going to particular doctors that don't listen to you. There will be, and I guess it's not a matter of listening or not, it's just maybe what some doctors believe in, or, there will be the right medical team out there for you. And as frustrating as it can be, don't be afraid to keep trialing things, because I was really nervous to see a pelvic floor physio, but that helped me a lot. I had a really tight pelvic floor because of ballet, and that was contributing to a lot of my pain. Things like acupuncture can really help. And definitely even seeing like a psychologist to help deal with the mental side of it. I mean, it's a lot to deal with physically and emotionally. So, that can really help. But I think knowing as well that there is an incredible community of really strong women out there who have your back find, you know, wherever you are in the world, I would say there would be a support group for you on Facebook. I mean, I know there's like 3 or 4 in Melbourne alone. So find those support groups and reach out to people. I mean, I've made some amazing friends and amazing connections over the last 2 years on this journey, and you know, met some incredible people, and just having that person to vent to who knows what you're going through is really, really powerful, and can just make you feel really validated, because, you know, you can explain it to your family or your friends as much as you want, but if they're not going through it, they don't know exactly how it is. So just finding those people that get you and who understand what you're going through, fighting for, you know, what you believe you feel, and not you know, not letting other people take that away from you, I think is really important.
Well, I think that's a fantastic way to finish, you know, having women understand that there's other women that can fight for them, and you know, and believe in yourself. So thank you so much for, you know, for tonight, and I really hope that, you know, the films are going to be amazing, and is really successful, and the awareness happens, that we can have this talked about in everyday language, and that women can, you know, have learn from your journey to diagnosis. So
thank you so much. Thank you for this amazing opportunity, and for giving me a platform to share my story and to help other women.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.